The majority shareholder in the Takatso Consortium, that's the South African Airways, its chosen strategic equity partner says it has no plans to ask the minority shareholders to exit. Now, this is despite the recent resignation of Director Gidon Novick, who represented the minority shareholders on the Takatso board. Novick resigned, citing a lack of transparency regarding the deal and concerns over the status of funding. Let's get clarity now on why Gidon Novick made this decision, and he joins us from the Western Cape. Mr. Novick, thank you very much for your time. For the record, why did you leave Takatso as a director there?
Coley, I think you got it spot on. We didn't have access to the information we needed, specifically around the progress of the deal. We're getting quite concerned as to how long it's taken. It's already been 18 months, and obviously this is a company that needs urgent help, and I don't think time is on our side. So that was a further concern. And then obviously, as you mentioned, the issue of capital. Has the capital been raised? Are there any hurdles or stumbling blocks to actually raising the money needed to relaunch SAA?
You are a co-founder of Lift Airline, which automatically raises the question of conflict of interest. Should you have taken up this directorship in the first place?
Well, I was asked to be a director. I think, regarding Lift, the whole point of this exercise was that SAA really essentially needed two things and still does. One is obviously capital. The other is skills and expertise. And the Lift and the team around Lift is really the skills element of the consortium. So that was always going to be a part of it. It was a part of it from the start. Obviously, in terms of things like, sensitive commercial information around SAA's operations, we've never requested that. We would never want to see that. And that could absolutely cause a conflict. And that's why we've been very clear from the start that that is not information that we want to have access to. But what we absolutely need to know as partners in the consortium is what's happening with the deal.
And so what information then were you being barred access to when you raised the question of a lack of transparency?
Well, I think, what is happening with the deal? Where exactly is it? I understand, from reading in the press and hearing through the media that, there's Competitions Commission approval. I understand all of that. But are there any other hurdles? Are there any other roadblocks ahead that could prevent this deal from happening? And in particular, has the capital been raised? Albeit maybe there's some conditions with the capital. Is there a committed capital partner that's going to bring the funding required to do this deal? And those were the questions that we were putting to the consortium.
Well, that raises questions of due diligence. You are part of the Takatso Consortium, or at least were. Was the due diligence done to satisfy at least the majority shareholder, which is government at the time, that indeed Takatso could be a majority shareholder here, ultimately?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what work was done from the DPE side. We spent a lot of time early on, and this is really essentially the management company that does a lot of work around running Lift. We did a lot of work around building a new business plan for SAA. Obviously, given its history and given the 50 billion rand that it had lost in the last 10 years, a fresh, new, innovative, agile business plan was required. And we spent many months doing that. Fortunately, it was a time when there were lockdowns and, closures of air travel. So, we were able to really focus on building, what does a new, fresh SAA look like? That was the business plan that ultimately would have, then needed to have capital supporting it. Whether DPE, got a confirmation of that capital, I assume not. But, right now that is the question that, we still have regarding the capital required for the deal.
I think you are referring to the 3.5 billion that has been spoken about at length. I'm going to ask you that question, so please make provision to answer to that. But I want to ask you right now, around the issues of possible conflict of interest, was there ever a possibility of a merger between Lift Airline and SAA?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, if you think about it logically, Collie, that in my mind, that's the logical solution. To take, let's just break this down a little bit. What is Lift? Lift is a relatively new airline. It's been going for 2 years. It has an excellent management team, and I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about, the people running it day to day are the top people in the industry. We have incredible talent in South Africa. These were people that were very much affected by COVID. Many of them didn't have jobs at the time, but they had deep talent and experience in the industry. And in fact, many of them came from SAA, ironically. So here you have a team and a capability that have proven over 2 years that they can build a very successful airline in a short space of time in very difficult circumstances, COVID in particular. On the other hand, you have an SAA which has a troubled past. We all know that, but has some real strengths. The strength that we see is in the region. SAA actually used to do incredibly well on the African continent. And our belief is it can do extremely well on the African continent, maybe 1 or 2 long-haul routes like Johannesburg, London, Cape Town, London. That space is very competitive with, global carriers that are, world-class carriers, many of them located in the Middle East. So to cut a long story short, you have, in my view, very complementary skills and assets that could be combined into a very effective entity.
Well, but that would raise competition rules, would it not? That you would become too powerful.
Well, look, I'm not a competition law expert, but what I do know is if you look at the current market, obviously it's changed dramatically over COVID. The whole market was transformed. Comair was the biggest player in the market. They're in liquidation. They're out. They had about 40% of the market. So right now you have one carrier in particular, which is a large carrier, a dominant player in the market. And you have a number of smaller players, and including in the smaller players is SAA, is Lift, and 1 or 2 other competitors in the game. So we see an industry where, where a single dominant player is not ideal. What you ideally want is you want a handful of very strong players that combine their efforts and produce a business plan that is sustainable, robust, and can compete with larger carriers in the game.
Yeah, Gidon, I'm wondering if you have more time. I could still continue the conversation a little after 10.
100%.
Okay, great stuff. Sure. Thanks for staying on. We're going to take headlines at the top of 10 and then come back quickly to you. Stay watching. We're going to bring you those latest headlines in a moment and continue the conversation with Gidon Novick in a bit. Still in conversation with the former director of Takatso Consortium, Gideon Novick, who resigned recently, citing a lack of transparency and a lack of clarity as to whether or not there is still funding for this deal. Gidon, we left off where you were explaining that this possibility of a merger between Lift and SAA could have made a formidable team that would, I suppose, propel SAA to even greater heights. But how does that now look, that possibility? Is there even still talk around that, given the Takatso transaction that is still in the offing?
Well, Collie, I think it's a bit of a confusing time. This process is approaching 2 years. We've got a completely open mind. Running a business, it's consuming our time and our efforts. We see the potential with SAA. We continue to see the potential with SAA. We want to be involved with SAA. We have an open mind as to what that solution could look like. I think, one has to be creative in terms of, different options and how the thing could work. A merger does make sense. It's complicated. There's complexities around valuations. How do you value the two entities? Because that's what one would need to do in a merger situation. So, I don't want to say it's a simple thing, but it certainly is possible. Obviously, one would need to get approval from the competitions authorities. But, the fact remains that SAA, in our strong view, has the potential. It needs the skills. It needs the right leadership. And, South Africa's got the people. It's a mistake and something that keeps getting overlooked. And we beat ourselves up by saying that we don't have the capability. We don't have the skills. We failed in the past. That's the wrong narrative. We have the skills. We have the capability. We can be successful. And SAA can be a shining light in terms of what South Africans can do with their own assets.
Yeah. Let's talk about the 3.5 billion rand issue. I suppose the first question there is, where was this money going to come from? Let me start there.
Just to clarify, my understanding of the numbers, Kholi, is that there was an outstanding debt or outstanding liabilities that the government still had to service. And I think that translates into round about that 3.5 billion that you're speaking of. The consortium made a commitment of 3 billion, which was going to be the capital really to take the company forward. The 3.5 billion was kind of historic, and then there was the 3 billion to take it forward. Regarding the source of that capital, that's something that was completely out of our domain, and part of the frustration within the consortium was understanding exactly the question you asked. Who's providing that capital? Where's it coming from? What are the terms of it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are, obviously critical issues when you're taking over a company that's likely to require significant sums of money just to get to a point of break even. One needs to know what are the terms of that? Is it secured? And, and can we move ahead?
Yeah. And I suppose that the question around this, Gidon, has to do with what now appears to be the message from Treasury, which says there are no consultations around this 3.5 billion rand, and so it doesn't look like Treasury is going to fund this. And so the question remains, how was this deal or final deal decided upon if the question of 3.5 was still in doubt?
Yeah, well, you're asking the wrong person. I mean, I don't understand politics and what goes on behind closed doors between government departments. But, there were two components essentially, and I think it's, very clear public knowledge. There was, the historical debt of the company, which anybody buying a business, does not want to get entangled in the historic debts. I think that's fair and reasonable. And then there's the business plan going forward and the funding required for that. So, yeah, I mean, I think clarity is required. And as I say, almost 2 years on, it's just taking way too long.
Yeah. Is there certainty, Gidon, at least in your mind, that this deal will ever be concluded without this element, a very important element of a 3.5 billion?
No, there's not certainty, and that's where part of, I think, restlessness lies, is that there is no certainty. There needs to be clarity. If there are hurdles or there are obstacles, let's just be very clear what they are. Can they be overcome or not? If not, what's the alternative plan? So that's, there's always a plan. Something can always be done, but I think one has to be very clear on what are the circumstances that we're facing right now. By the way, we remain on as minority shareholders in the consortium. We have shares in the consortium, and if the transaction's concluded, ultimately in SAA. We've made it very clear that we will continue to offer assistance wherever we can. We're absolutely not interested in any confidential information on a competitor, just to be crystal clear. But we're here to help. So, we've got an open mind. We've got a, very creative team that can think up solutions to very complex problems. And again, this is a problem that I think is completely solvable with the right heads around the table.
I want to conclude the conversation on this final note, and that is the suggestions that have been made that you were, when I say you, I'm talking about Takatso Consortium, were handpicked by the Department of Public Enterprises to become the equity partners, the strategic equity partners of SAA. Is that true, that you were, quote-unquote, handpicked?
So just to be clear on the history there, and I think we came in pretty late, but my understanding of the history, and I stand to be corrected, was that government went through quite a long process with an appointed bank, I think it was RMB, to find a strategic equity partner for SAA. We were not part of that at the time. I think it was at the beginning of COVID. I had no involvement or interest in the industry at that point in time. That process ended, and there was no partner. We then got a call. I think it was around about January 2021 from the DPE saying, are you open to exploring a conversation around becoming the strategic equity partner of SAA? And I said, well, if it's kind of the old way of structuring a deal, I'm not particularly interested. And the response was, we're prepared to relook at this. We're prepared to, accommodate a commercial deal, and we're prepared to give up 51%. Now that was that was quite something at the time, because I don't think that was on the table before. So that was interesting, and that I saw that as an opportunity. Obviously, as time went on, there was the requirement for a capital partner and a BEE partner, and that's where government said to ourselves and Harith, you guys need to get together and form this consortium, which we did, and that was the history of it. So the process, and I don't know what DPE's exact process was, but we got the call, and we saw an opportunity to get involved. We saw an opportunity to help. We still see that opportunity, even though it's been a long time since then.
Yeah. And
hopefully something good comes of it.
Are you at liberty at all to share the name of the person who made the call?
Say again, because I can't hear you.
Are you at liberty to share the name of the person who made the call?
It was an advisor to the DPE. I don't think it's right for him to mention his name. But the DPE at the time had a number of advisors who, were incredibly smart people advising the DPE on strategy. And I got a call from one of those advisors.
Gidon Novick, let me thank you very much for your time and allowing us the opportunity to explore this, at least at length. Thanks indeed for your insight here. Thank you very much.